Hey guys, welcome back to some more AFK Arena. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the hero swap in relationship to the Celestials and the Hypos. Now, there are a lot of players out there that, just similar to me, have Wukong built, they have Flora built, they have a lot of these 5-star heroes that they have built through time, through all of the events, through all of the free copies that we've gotten. And a lot of players have been asking the question over on YouTube. We know we went over the Awakened heroes, but what does it look like for the Celestials and Hypos if we do not want to swap any of those Awakened heroes? So I want to kind of break it down and looking again at the swap that we have going on right now. If you haven't used it like I haven't, we've just been kind of sitting on this hero swap and looking at, of course, using someone like Flora within the swap means that in the future, when you get additional copies of Flora, and honestly, if you have Wukong built up or have Wukong, I would probably first use Wukong for the simple fact that you can continue buying those additional copies of Wukong out of the shop, which is exactly what I'm doing. I think I have Wukong already at 1 star all the way to Ascended again since the last time we did the swap. Now, when it comes to the swap, again, we kind of want to prioritize what we have here and what we're looking at. And the first one in here to absolutely prioritize is when it comes to our Celestials is Liberta. Now, this is 100% the absolute best swap you want to do. When you look at this hero overall, when you look at the utility of this hero, it is by far number one, the absolute primary if you do not have him built out. And a lot of players even do the swap to add the additional stars on there. Or if you build out Flora, you could go ahead and swap it to Liberta. But if you do not have Liberta, again, if you're an earlier player, this is going to be the number one choice when it comes to the swap. Absolutely. So let's say just like most players, because we know out of the Stargazer, this is the number one really hero that you're looking for a lot of content. So you already have Liberta. Then who do we look at? Number two, I would still stay in looking at the heroes that we have. I would look at Aurelia. Now, one thing to note is building out Aurelia has an incredible amount of utility. There is not a campaign or there is not a place within AFK Arena in general that this hero is not being used. Now, one very, very big side note when it comes to Aurelia is you have to have the plus 40 signature item. So if you don't have the material to get her up to the plus 40 signature item, chances are the utility of this hero is not going to be as high as players think or as high as players want through a lot of different game modes. She is one of the very few heroes that does require a plus 40 signature item and really to be effective. If you have a 30, if you have a 35, you will not see the effectiveness of this hero overall until you do get into that plus 40 range. Now, thinking of number three, or really slot number three, I would probably look at Lavatune. Now, Lavatune does incredibly well, which is actually right here. Lavatune does incredibly well, again, utility-wise, still in that very top SSS tier when it comes to the ability to buff, when it comes to some of the formations with damage dealing. But when it comes to a really hard carry, Lavatune does work super, super well in a ton of formations. Again, utility-wise, support heroes do not fall out of utility as much as we see like damage dealers. I do not recommend doing any of the damage dealers. When you start fast forwarding about 3 to 6 months, majority of the damage dealers that we're seeing today, including some of those Awakened heroes, are going to be completely obsolete, as we see, a Scion, a Hylia, a lot of other heroes that keep coming like an Envy to replace them within those meta formations. Now, after Lavatune, I would probably look and go in here and build out Damia. Damia is another one, utility-wise, still has a ton of utility, and the big part with Damia is the survivability. When you start looking at Iran, when you start looking at Lucius, when you start looking at, Skyland, when you look at a lot of the heroes that are really big powerhouse damage dealing heroes in AFK Arena, Damia can keep them alive. It is something that is super important when you look, again, thinking of utility still in that very top echelon of the SSS tier. I'm building out Damia, super important to have. And then when you do get that level 2 Mahira collection on her, it gives her kind of a cheat death utility. We have seen it in, I think, the last 2 or even 3 iterations of the Abyssal Expedition. There are a lot of game modes where your team would have died because of the Enrage, but they stay alive because of Damia and essentially cheating it. And the last one that we see in this very top tier is Lucila. Now, Lucila, of course, is the counterpart to Liberta. And overall, these two are now being run pretty much together almost every single time that I see them. They are run kind of in unison. They are kind of run together within here, making it really important to have them. And again, this is kind of the defensive side of Liberta. She will keep Liberta alive. And of course, when it comes to Treasure Scramble, when it comes to a couple PvP modes, she has the ability to die, come back to life, die, come back to life. That is something that we started seeing with a lot of heroes in AFK Arena, is the ability to literally bring them back to life every single time that they die, kind of over and over and over again. Now, when we think again as really the final hero, or thinking about bigger picture what we have, I would probably say Knox would be my next choice. Again, seeing a lot of PvP run with him, seeing a lot of Treasure Scramble. Formations, it seems like some of them, he's kind of fading out as we continue to get more heroes into AFK Arena. I don't know. I know the stall team, when you're running with the Awakened version of Thorin, when you're running the Slumbering Seal, Knox is just broken because nobody can catch him. And if you can't catch him, you can't kill him within formations, allowing the seal to essentially amp up a crazy amount of damage that we're seeing out of there. Now, short of these ones, when we go out and when we start looking at the rest of the heroes, and again, kind of touching on both of the Celestials and the Hypos, when you look at Liberta, when you look at Damia, when you think of Aurelia, most of them are the big priorities that we already have built. When you start looking at the other ones like Chad, when you look at the twins, even Taylene, most of these, short of the tower themselves, you're not going to see a lot of utility at all for any of these, which is kind of sad. But again, a lot of them, you're not going to see utility. Even looking at Alna, she could possibly one that I would build, but with the ability to get her out of the Challenger store, I would probably just get her that way and save the swap for someone else, including the Awakened heroes. Now, even when we drop in the Hypo or we hop over here, again, when you look at Knox, when you look at Lavatune, when you start looking at the rest of these, not, again, a ton of utility outside of really the three that we were mentioning in here. Even when we start looking at like Frampton, Kanisa, and Rook, when you look at Zolrath, even looking at Mortis, you know, Kelthin, and a lot of questions, of course, about Kelthin. Again, short of the Hypo Tower, you're not going to see a lot of utility for really any of these, which is kind of sad because unfortunately, you know, these used to be meta when you start looking back on months or even years in AFK Arena. These used to be a ton of meta heroes that we had. I remember when Olgath was the absolute, just crushing it with how fast we could put out damage. Then, of course, Kelthin came out, Matria came out. A lot of them really just replaced him. Eugene was another one that was a really big replacement for some of the heroes in here. And the exact same thing when, you know, Chad or Vithiel was an absolute top tier, must have SSS tier, really making a big difference. Even looking at like Zolrath, we've seen a lot of utility. Halos was absolutely broken when he came out, which again, it's kind of cool to see. But then when you look at Morio, when you look at Aurelia, again, they've all kind of seen their time. And unfortunately, it has kind of come and gone for a majority of these heroes. So thinking about the build, again, those are probably the top 6 that I would swap. Swapping out Wukong before I would swap out Flora if I did have a choice between those. Because, of course, Wukong, like I said earlier, you can continue buying him out of the Labyrinth store. And even right here, if you guys remember, I swapped him last year for the swap. I think it was last year. But we swapped him to another hero that was literally just a very base epic. And then I built him all the way up through the shop again, like we've seen. So, all right, guys. So that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.